Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to Untangled. Today, I am thrilled to have Dr. Cheryl Abellanoza, a cognitive psychologist turned industry leading UX research strategist. As an associate director of UX research at Verizon, Cheryl leads a team that bleeds scientific rigor with human centered product strategy to improve complex enterprise experiences. She's a blogger, an author, a speaker, and an overall delightful person. Welcome to the show, Cheryl.
Oh, thanks for having me. That was so nice.
I had to do my research. We have to enjoy it. So, Cheryl, I am super excited to talk to you. So, we kind of had our little pre meet, and I got off and I was like, I'm going to meet her. We're going to be friends. So, I am super excited to have you on the show. Um, for my audience, just a little bit about them. So, my audience is typically made up of people kind of all over the spectrum in UX. A lot of new people, a lot of people I call old heads like us who have been doing this a while, and then people who are just kind of thinking outside the box. A lot of my content is around what's next for you. How do you build your career? So we're kind of all over the board. So if you could just kind of help them focus and center a little bit, can you introduce yourself and then kind of tell my team, the audience, about you?
Absolutely. Well, in the role that I'm in now as associate director, I'm leading a team of UX researchers. I'm also leading people leaders. So, getting to understand what that journey looks like from their lens and having gone through it myself. So, that's kind of the day to day. I'm also jumping in on cross-functional teams and working with leadership to understand where can customer stories really land and make a difference. So I'd say those two things are the top priorities of what I'm focusing on the day to day and where I feel like I'm growing next. So yeah.
So I've been in a lot of conversations. So I'm going to ask you something because you just said it. So you specifically said a people leader. What is a people leader and how is that different from just being a manager?
That's a great question. I think I'm also still learning about what that difference really entails. When you're starting out, you're thinking, okay, when you're a manager, you kind of have all the control. You can make decisions. You can shape things the way you want to shape them. And what I'm learning more and more is that it's really about understanding how to work with people to accomplish goals together. And as part of that, you're developing talent, developing your connection with other people, supporting people in accomplishing their goals, and also learning new things along the way that you might never have expected would be part of your role as a leader. So while when you may manage tasks, you may manage teams, you may manage processes, a people leader has that extra element of developing and nurturing talent with folks as well.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, so thinking about like how you got into UX, can you talk us through that journey?
Yeah. Oh man, I bet your audience also really relates to this because you talked about the beautiful spectrum of experiences that we all have. And you probably, I mean, I know you can vouch for this, but we all have our own unique ways into the field. We all have different stories. Um, and so I started off in a pre-med role thinking I want to help people. And that was just the main goal was working with people and finding some way to help them every day. That was what, my family knew most immediately as a way to get into that, to work in a health profession. And as I started to go through the curriculum, I thought, I'm most interested in understanding people, maybe not so much the actual diagnoses or the fundamentals of how our bodies work, but mostly how our brains work and what healing can come from that. So that led me into clinical psychology. And I went into a clinical counseling route, got my master's in that. And as I did that work, I realized so much of this is built upon how our brains work. I really wanted to get an understanding of what the latest in our research generally as humans told us about what our brains do in different situations and as we're connecting with each other and making sense of the world and our experiences. So that led me into that work. Fundamental cognitive neuroscience, worked in a memory lab, got to do fMRI studies. But if you're familiar with those kinds of studies, you're kind of locked in a room with no windows and you're actively telling people not to talk in this big magnet. And you're structuring really cool, interesting studies to get information about how our brains are operating under different conditions. But I really missed that human element of getting to talk to people, especially given the clinical work that I had done. you learn a lot about people's stories and you dig deeper into these fundamental experiences that they have. And so I missed a little bit of that. And I felt like the research I was doing was going to frankly sit on a shelf and no one was really going to engage with it. Um, I could go on and on about scientific and academic writing being so inaccessible as well. And I wanted to, like many of us who find our ways into UX, I wanted to find a way to do research that would actually have some kind of day to day difference for someone, whether it's a small problem that fixes or sorts out 5 minutes of your day to these larger, bigger questions about how do we build systems and processes and products that are more ethical and more inclusive. So that's how I found my way into UX. I actually started volunteering with a human computer interaction lab um, at my campus when I was doing this fMRI research. And then found UX, found that a lot of the same fundamental principles of research design that I learned in my cognitive psychology classes applied to this environment. And then I was hooked. So that's how I found myself as a UX researcher after all this time.
I love the story. And like you said, when you got started, there's so many different ways that people have come into this space, right? We all tried a bunch of different things, but it was like that aha moment like, no, I really want to be close to people, right? I want to be able to hear and tell those stories. So I love that. So then, how does that cognitive science, behavioral science fit into your work now?
Yeah, it's so interesting. You think that the research processes that you learn along the way are going to be the most applicable to your day to day. It turns out the psychology of it all is the most fundamental thing and the most used thing, I would say, in my day to day. So, on the one hand, the research can certainly lend itself to methodology that you can bring in. We've experimented a little bit in the past on things like virtual reality environments and understanding cognitive perceptions, processing when looking at different kinds of stimuli. And there's certainly a lot of foundational behavioral statistics that are part of the psychology program that I took and graduated from. So a lot of those methods were very applicable. Obviously, a lot of the interviewing skills, I think that's such a key thing that I learned from my clinical experience. It gave me a framework to approach my interviewing style. And so I borrow a lot from those fundamental frameworks and kind of shift them and shape them into how I do my work with the team. And then also as a manager and leader, a lot of those really great foundational frameworks of understanding people and teams also come in and apply really well to understanding conflict resolution or team building or even career development. So a lot of psychology is just inherently within the UX work and then also within, growing your career.
How does that play out when we start talking about findings? Because I feel like a lot of times the way the business chooses to communicate, right, can sometimes water down some of the methods and the techniques that we put into the research. So, how have you seen that play out?
Oh yeah, that's a really great question and one that our team's always juggling, trying to figure out what lands, what sticks, and what are the things that we need to process in order to get there. So, when it comes to communication, we're obviously bringing a lot of the psychology of storytelling into our work. So, figuring out how to craft a compelling narrative, trusting that the insights that we've gathered, because we've done all of that great upfront work in our research design, we know that those insights scope to a certain extent. Maybe it was a quick, fast paced project, but we know that all the caveats, all the warnings that come with those insights. Maybe we've done a deeper dive into something over a longer period of time that might have a wider scope and wider applicability. So being able to kind of translate all of those different insights back into that kind of business jargon and really come at it with powerful storytelling, those have been big needle movers for us.
I love that. Thank you. Let's think about research in general. Are there any methods? Because I feel like your toolkit is probably bigger than most. So, are there any methods that you feel like we just don't use enough? People don't talk about enough. We don't think to use enough.
Yeah, I love this question. There were two that immediately came to mind for this, for me. The first one is I don't know what everyone's experiences are, but I felt like we didn't, especially in my collaboration with the HCI lab, we happened not to talk about interviewing skills as much, nor did we talk about like foundational frameworks. So, what I was able to bring in from clinical psychology was a cognitive behavioral theory framework of understanding how people make meaning. So I kind of bring that, and I have a presentation on how do you do this? How do you layer different kinds of interviewing styles from a clinical psychology perspective into a customer or user interview? So from my framework, it's really about what are people's behaviors, thoughts, foundational beliefs that come into play. I'll give an example. I used to work with a consumer product that focused on monitoring driving within a family. And so what that allowed us to do was dig deep with folks on understanding what does driving really mean to people. For many teens that we spoke to who were learning how to drive, this meant freedom. Driving meant that they were able to get up and go whenever they needed to go or wanted to go. It meant connection because it meant that they could go to spaces where other folks they wanted to socialize with would be. For parents, driving meant concern or worry. I want to make sure my loved ones are safe, especially if they're newer to driving. And in the event that unfortunately folks get into when they have a certain crash or some sort of emergency situation on the road, driving meant safety. So, how do we make sure that folks are getting the resources they need? And what does that mean as far as their identity as a driver? Some folks would say that after a crash, even if they weren't at fault, they would then say, I'm not a good driver. And evidence of me being in this experience kind of suggests that to me. So it's our identities that really shape the way that we make that meaning and vice versa. What do we bring to the table and what experiences are we opening ourselves up to? So having that framework into all of these different kinds of interviews that we have has really helped us connect with folks and understand questions underneath the actual questions we're asking for the purposes of the research. So I'd say interviewing skills and whatever framework it is, bringing a framework into that process has been really helpful. So that's one method. And then another method would be behavioral statistics. So, with cognitive and clinical psychology, there are different statistics toolboxes that we have that we can bring into the work. One of those things is factor analysis. And I'll shout out one of our teammates, Stephen Dorfler, who I actually also graduated from the same program with in our behavioral research kind of past in academia. He brought in a K clusters kind of process into understanding how to develop personas. And it was a great way to bring in this statistical process, but also mix that in with all of the years of qualitative data that we had gathered and just boost that confidence in seeing mathematically these same clusters are coming up. So there must be some really great, strong validation of these personas that we conceptually had. So I'd say those two things, a framework for interviewing skills and these behavioral statistics that we don't always apply or might not even know how to apply to certain problem areas.
So thinking about a lot of organizations, UX sits separate from that type of data. So who should they be looking for in their organizations to be able to get that?
Oh, that's a really great question. It's kind of everywhere. Everyone's doing their research, and we're all now able to access lots of different tools that get us that information. But I think one great place to start would be with any data analytics, data science, behavioral analytics teams. There's a really great marriage of our two disciplines where you can dig into that data, and what behavioral research and UX research really brings to that lens is a hypothesis-based approach. We already have certain, frameworks or initial ideas or concepts that we want to test and validate. And I would say, from my perspective or observation, that data analytics is a real powerhouse in being able to start with the data and just jump in, explore, discover. So, bringing in a little bit of hypothesis testing and then also finding specialists and expertise in those teams to help you unlock the power of what you can do with that data, that is a catalyst of innovation. So, I would start with those teams.
I agree. I think that's a game changer, right? Using those soft skills to reach across and say, "Hey, I think if we work together, we could build something or see something amazing." So I love that. Thank you. Your story as you were talking through, kind of how you're breaking down the framework. My son is 16 and driving, right? So you're
Mhm.
spot on. Like that is, he just feels freedom. I felt a little anxiety today because I had to ask for my own keys, right, for
Oh,
my car.
wow.
I need to, okay. Do you have plans, sir? So that's awesome. Thank you. So now getting into that idea of having to work with other teams, talk to us about how do y'all work at Verizon, right? And what does that cross-functional team look like there?
Yeah, it's we sit within a group that we call PEX, which is Product Engineering and Experience. So we're already at our core base quite cross-functional. We work in smaller cross-functional teams that are organized by certain themes or top priorities. And then across the business, we were also collecting information from other groups across the business, like those data analytics teams, as well as our customer support and our sales teams. So I think the more that I'm learning about the business process overall, the more I find out that other teams are just as interested in these customer stories and explorations of customer experiences to understand what are these customers' core values and how do we shape our products and processes to align to those core values. So it started off, these partnerships started off from our core base and that we already were organized in this way, but the more that we learned about the business, the more friends we made along the way. And that really helped usher in new kinds of collaborations. It all comes back to relationship building. I loved what you said about that soft skills approach of let's just learn from each other and about each other. And the more that we spend time with each other, learning and growing together, we can attack and challenge all of these kinds of status quos and innovate and find new real solutions.
And have y'all always worked that way, kind of under this PEX umbrella, or is that a change that's happened since you've been there?
Yeah, it started off, I think we had maybe less formalized versions of this, but the teams, when I started with the group, were already working in this way. So we had strong connections, not just across these teams, but also across locations. So shout out to our Dublin, Ireland team. There's a huge contingency of our specialists and folks in that office. And so not only are you working cross functionally with regard to discipline, but also culture, location, these elements that make it all the more human. So I was fortunate to step into a place that kind of had cross-functional collaboration as the background and soul of everything that we did. Whereas the collaborations with our great customer success and support teams, our sales teams, our training teams, these are newer collaborations, but they're just as open and just as welcoming to coming together and working together on all of these different initiatives and even just bouncing ideas around with each other. Marketing is another great team that we've been working with because of the power of customer stories and what we can create out of those stories as well. So newer ones definitely coming up over the last couple of years, but it did take leadership to make sure that cross-functional collaboration was a core element of all of the work that we do.
What advice would you have for teams? Because, a lot of times we all want to get to the same place, but we have very different ways of how we think we might get there. So, what advice would you have someone who's kind of in that space where they're like, they don't get it, right? And they're having that tension?
Yeah, that's a tough one because we all are ultimately wanting the same thing. We want lives to be made easier and we want to be part of the solution. So I think rerouting and regrounding around that is really helpful. I know that there's a lot of intentionality that folks across our teams put into those conversations. So maybe it's a workshop we're setting up or a team meeting that we're setting up. It's just really helpful to make sure that we're all aligned on the goals and where we want to go. And as far as that kind of approach of how we get there, it can feel so different because so many different ideas are coming into the pipeline. I'm finding more and more that we're all saying the same thing, but just using different language to describe that. So I think if we spend time unpacking exactly where our motivations come from, then we'll see, oh, actually, we are in alignment and we've been in alignment this entire time. Here's what I can contribute to bring to that
Mhm.
project. And maybe here's what my stakeholder or partner might be doing from their end, but it's all going into the same solution.
Mhm.
So I think that's an important thing. I think that calls on us to be a little bit more business savvy. That's been an education for me to just understand other people's jargon, other people's terminology, and also to understand their goals. What are the things they're reporting on? What are the things that they're accountable for? How can our research and our UX work help support that? And then we're all working together and we feel like we're on the same team.
So this question comes up quite a bit, when we start yearly planning, right? What KPIs, what metrics? So where does your research organization look to show up in those KPIs and those metrics?
Absolutely, yes. We talk a lot about different frameworks. Over the years, we've used things like OKRs. We've used Hoshin, which is a very elaborate way of getting to goals that are staggered according to different timelines. So, immediate goals versus goals that are maybe a year or 5 years out. And they're all different frameworks of essentially bringing folks together and coming into agreement, right? So, there's different styles, and it's helpful to learn what those different styles are, just so that you have that familiarity of language with your fellow teammates. I think also we've, as a UX research team, been able to contribute our own metrics to those conversations. So let's say a goal might be that we want to know our customers more. Well, we get to be able to say autonomously, well, here are all the different ways that you can engage with our customers. One metric that we've reported on in the past is the number of customer hours. And that included direct hours that we spent interviewing customers, either remotely or on site, as well as the amplification of those communications. So let's say 40 people attended a readout that we had at the end of the week. That counts for something. They spent some time with us. We had a conversation about customers, and hopefully we had a really interesting story to share in that time that was highly relevant to the work that those folks are doing. So we wanted to count that as time doing the work, not just passively taking in information. So I think when we highlighted, you guys are doing this, the team is already engaging with this information. We've just never surfaced it in a certain way. That really started to take a lot of people's interest up in, hey, how do I engage even more on this? And I think that also helped us build out and make the case for building out things like our research repository and library. Now you have an asynchronous way to engage with customers. All of our interviews are in one place. All of those transcripts are available. You can too dig into those insights. You don't have to wait for a researcher to guide you, but you've got a team of experts to help you when you have questions. So I think being able to call attention to that and create our own metrics that support the business metrics and a leadership team that was very open to that really helped.
So, my follow up question is going to be, who is tracking that? Who is doing that?
Yeah, I love this question too because it requires really strong intentionality, doesn't it? Of being able to advocate for this role, recognizing that in and of itself is a specialization. So, one thing is that our research team uses that as an opportunity to come together every quarter, at least, if not every month, to just take stock of all of the things that we've done. Big events, the amount of interviews that we've done, maybe that stretch of time. We also have a great tool, Dovetail, that we use to look at all of the metadata that they already collect. How many people have come into our research library and spent time with our studies? How many clicks has a page gotten? And I think we used to have a team that looked at this from a research ops perspective. Shout out to that team. We no longer have that team, unfortunately, but we learned a lot from that time. And we've been able to kind of scale how we track feasibly, right? When you have a whole team, you're able to do more, but you can still track those things if you have the right tools, and you can shape it as your team ebbs and flows as well.
I love that. Thank you. So many ideas going through my head. Like, I know how we could use that. Okay. Let's talk about your team and the researchers that you manage. Talk to me about the structure of your team.
Got it. Yeah, the research team, a shout out to the research team. They're incredible. They're an amazing group. I'm very fortunate to get to work with them every day. I learn so much from them every single day. We kind of mimic the same process that I talked about with our PECS team structure, where we have certain themes of cross functional teams that align to a certain goal or part of the product. And so we've got a research lead in each of these themes that they then shape the research roadmap and research vision for. So we've got a team of, I think it's 5 of us now, 6 of us, that lead specific areas or themes. And they kind of have to bring in a lot of our specialized research conversations and champion that by bringing it back to the cross functional team. So it takes a lot of work for our research teams to dig deep in that kind of like T-shaped approach where you dig deep in the core of the tea to get deep knowledge, deep insights and understanding, and then come back up and then start sharing that broadly across the organization. So it's interesting. We are kind of our own thing, but then we also have ways to plug into the wider PEX team as a whole.
Okay. Do you still have to do research, or are you just people managing at this point?
That, well, it's kind of been different at different times with our team scale changing over time. We've had a bigger team, we've had smaller teams at various points over the past 8 years that I've been with the company. Right now, we're in a phase where I am doing some of that direct research work for key projects. Um, Previously, when we had a bigger team, I was focusing more on those business communications and customer stories strategies. And what I like about where I am now is that I felt like I was missing kind of what I was talking about with the academic work that I was doing. I was missing the one to one with people and understanding the folks that we serve. The customers that we talk to all the time are folks that are in fleet management. So these are people like dispatchers or drivers or small or large business owners. And I missed getting to talk to them every day about their work. So I am doing a little bit of that work. I'm also doing a little bit of, career development with my team, understanding what their goals are as researchers, as UXers, as people in the world, and trying to find ways to allow folks to step into those new roles or experiment with new ideas. So it's hard to describe, but it's work that kind of requires me to be aware of what else the business is working on and pointing people to those opportunities and saying, I remember you had a goal on mentorship, and here's a mentorship program that's happening. Why didn't you go take advantage of that? And let's talk about it. So it's kind of these two things, plus this customer story initiative that I'm trying to champion throughout the company, definitely throughout our PEX team, of establishing these constant customer narratives. But one thing I'll say about that is as you step into different roles and as you become more senior in your careers, you also have to kind of go through an identity loss in many ways. When I first stepped into management, I thought that my role would be continuing to do research and then you just kind of manage folks and processes. But that was
In
so
your
different.
downtime, right? In your downtime, you'll just, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll just stop sleeping and then whatever time that you have on the off times, you'll dedicate to whatever you didn't get done during the day, right? It's impossible. So I had to realize, wow, the power in moving around a team like this is being able to work with people and allow folks to step into new roles. I learned a lot about delegation, maybe less delegation and more just teamwork, better structured teamwork of what are we all passionate about and who wants to volunteer to lead some of these initiatives. And reconciling with myself that even if I wasn't doing direct data collection, that didn't mean that I was still working in the research space. I'm just at a different view and I'm working at a different pace. And so that's been an interesting conversation of how do you morph that identity throughout different stages of your career or through different roles.
Can you give the audience a feel for what are some of those non UX questions or interactions that you're having to have with the business, right? Because I don't think people really understand, like, outside of UX, a lot of people don't necessarily, they don't get as excited about it, right? So a lot of the conversations that you're having are not even UX related. So can you kind of share, like, topic level with some of those things that are not UX related that fit in, right? That we need to be aware of, but are outside of our typical scope.
Gotcha. Yeah, one thing that comes to mind is just understanding business processes. So maybe in a research role when you're doing the direct data collection and your primary goal is to understand a person's day to day, or you're trying to get validation on a design, you're going to hear a lot about what your customer does, what they interact with, what they think about the concept or the design or prototype that they have on the screen. You're going to get a lot of that really pure information about what the solution that you're working on can or cannot do for them and how you can make that better for them and their experience. In addition to that, there are all of these other business processes that take place that may also impact feasibly, what can we build? What can't we build? Or what can we build but has dependencies on other things throughout the business? Maybe it's funding, or maybe it's we just don't have the tech setup that would allow for that. So we need to spend some time uh, investing in the building of that tech setup on the back end. And I think I now in this role and working with our great colleagues across our senior leadership team on the UX team, I'm learning from them what those challenges have looked like. I'm learning from our support teams what processes have been blocked for them for whatever reason, what recent developments have made some of those conversations on support teams easier for them to unlock some of those hurdles that customers have had in the past. And I've seen this team just really revamp a lot of cool things that I wasn't even aware of when I was doing that day to day foundational work. So I think the non UX piece is really about business processes and understanding the feasibility of the system. That systems thought is really, really helpful as you advance.
How has that awareness or that knowledge impacted how you do research and how you manage your team?
Oh, that's huge. I think it really can, in some ways, be sobering in the sense that, when we're feeling aspirational and inspired, we want to be able to build all the things. We want to be able to solve all the problems. And I find that sometimes we have to channel that energy into what is realistic for the time or the tools that we have. So balancing that without negating that exploratory spirit that our team has. I certainly don't want to be a wet blanket, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. We can't build that right now, or it doesn't make sense to have that conversation right now because of all of these other dependencies, but let's come back to it when the timing is right. So, a sobering reality in one instance, but at the same time, incredibly inspired because I'm able to see elements of the work that I didn't get to see before. And I see the hard work that those folks are doing. I'm learning about the vastness of teams and the scale and size of teams, and the true nuances of the challenges that they face. That, in and of itself, is a research finding. So, me being able to bring back those insights to a research team and say, did you know that this is how it operates over here in this part of the company? Oh, no, we didn't know about that. Let's dig into it deeper. Um, we talk about our customers, but many of our internal teams can also be viewed as our customers in this processes that we're building, especially when we're addressing internal things, internal processes, internal tools. We want to make sure that their experiences are just as seamless, right? Um, I'll say this too. My boss, Alicia Nachman, she's an incredible leader. She's been leading our team as a director for 5 years now. And she taught us about this principle called Conway's Law, which is essentially that organizations build systems that look like themselves. So all of the challenges that we face, our customers and our users can feel, and it's such an interesting thing when a customer says something that really resonates with you and you think, wow, that's actually very indicative of my employee experience. So let me go meet with my fellow employees and teammates and say, hey, do we feel the same pain point? How can we
Hmm.
make it better? So inspiring in that sense.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one. I once somebody told me that if you want to understand the culture of an organization, look at their website,
Oh,
right? And it's
yes.
a lot of the same things. I love that. That is so great. Okay, so now let's talk about Team Tuesdays. Okay, this
Oh,
seems
yeah.
this is a big deal. So, can you share with my audience what Team Tuesdays is?
Oh, yeah, Team Tuesdays. Thanks for giving Team Tuesdays a shout out. It's a passion project of mine. Started it up on LinkedIn, and it started off as me stepping into a management role and just as a researcher, like you do, trying to read about other people's experiences, trying to jump into the Harvard Business Review articles about management and reading recommended books on management and learning from all of the management courses that I had access to, whether that was within Verizon or just in the world. And I kept getting this feeling that I didn't feel represented in so many different ways.
Mm.
And I wondered, well, maybe it's just because I'm not processing information in the way that I like to, which is through writing. So I was taking in a lot of information, but I didn't really know how to use it or work with it. So I love to write. I come from academia, and that's a publish versus perish kind of rule. I like to write in my, as a hobby in my off time. So I thought, why don't I journal, journal about my experience so that I can process it for myself. And maybe I can also serve as representation in some small way if other folks are feeling similar to me. So I talked about what it was like to set up a team activity board every week, and just how do you connect with the team and set up team rituals that establish a home base that people can feel psychologically safe and feel inspired by. And so I started writing about these kinds of experiments that I was essentially running to help build teams and support teams. And then it evolved into something of, well, let me showcase the team every Tuesday on something that we're working on, or something special that we've arrived at, a conclusion we've arrived at collectively. And then it turned into, in its most recent iteration, I was having a conversation with our team, and we realized that in tech, it's very rare for us to have a line of frontline workers all the way to the C suite of women and women of color in that, on top of that. So I thought, that's something really special. Why don't I follow that line? And so I interviewed folks on our team that included, individual contributors that were early in their career, and then their managers who were stepping into a management role for the first time. And then from there, they reported into folks who had been in people management for a longer period of time, all the way up to our current C-suite leader, whose article I'm still working on.
Okay.
So that has just been, how do I talk about what I'm seeing, what I'm working on, and how do I shout my team out every Tuesday so that we can make sure and take stock of all of the things we're learning along the way.
So do they contribute to those articles, or is that kind of what those conversations are around?
Yeah, it's a mix of both, where if someone has an interesting story, they've come to me and said, "Yeah, I'd like to be part of this." It's also just been me processing that week or processing that quarter and writing an article about it. It also came out of, in the past, just wanting to take pictures of us in the office in the before times when we were in office all the time, for us, and just celebrate the team. Here's what it looks like for a team to walk the wall, and here's what it looks like for a team to, give status updates. Here's what it looks like when we're just goofing off and having fun.
Yeah.
So it's kind of been a mix of both, with me just kind of using it as a way to shout the team out.
Okay, so for the people who in the audience are looking for jobs and wondering what managers look like, can we talk through that a bit? So, what do you look for in a researcher?
Oh, that's such a great question. It's interesting. I kind of go into it half prepared of, I know I'm going to look for these things, but then I leave myself room to be pleasantly surprised by some unknown element that I don't know is coming. So I'll start off maybe with like the prepared stuff. Obviously skill sets are really important. And so we talk a lot about tools and tricks of the trade. Tell me more about your interviewing style, or tell me more about what specific methods you like to bring to the table. And sometimes that opens conversations up for service design or statistics, or maybe someone has an industrial hardware experience in their past that is really helpful in the space that we're in. So obviously we talk about kind of the meat and potatoes there. Then we also talk a little bit about, how do you work with other folks? What is your collaboration style? And so I really appreciate when people have thought about this and can vocalize that and say, here's what I've learned really works for me. Here's what I know I need to bring a little bit more energy into, and what I'm developing as well. So maybe that means you have a lot of experience working and collaborating with an engineer, but maybe not so much with someone from our support team. So that's good to know, of like, who have you collaborated with and what is your collaboration style? And there's certainly a lot of frameworks that you can bring into that conversation to help explain what that looks like, or even giving evidence in a portfolio of, here's a project we worked on together, and here's what I contributed, and here's what my teammates contributed to as well. So those are some of the standard things, right, that we would look for. But as far as that unknown element, I can reflect on some things that I think are really interesting. I really like when someone's funny. If someone's funny, that means that person is able to read the room, is processing information quickly, and has a witty take on it. And brings a relaxed, chill vibe into the work that we're doing. And that's so important for maintaining a healthy team culture. And so when I find myself in an interview with a candidate and I'm laughing, I'm thinking, hey, this is a good sign of things.
Mhm.
Triangulate that with everything else, but at least this is a nice moment to reflect on. And I always bring other folks into the interview process as well. And that's a really great team wide training that we've had where we want to get everyone else's take on what that moment looks like. Other questions that teammates may have, the ease of the conversation, and how much information we're able to kind of weed through in that time. It's so valuable to have these as a team discussion. So, never making decisions unilaterally, right? So, those are some of the things that I look for.
I love that. Thank you. That personality piece is so important. I tell people usually by the time you get to an interview, a lot of it is the vibe check, right? Like, can will I be able to work with you? Because all days aren't great days, right? So even on those days, can we still, can we still talk to each other? Can we still work together, right? Like
Mhm.
that's so important,
Absolutely.
especially when you get into research and traveling and all of that. Okay,
Yeah.
I want to be mindful of your time. So I know there's one thing that we haven't gotten to yet. So I want to go back to that. But let's talk about this idea of the frozen middle.
Mm,
Let's talk about that. So what does that mean? There are a lot of articles so people can go read them, but can you share your take on the frozen middle?
absolutely. It comes back to why Team Tuesdays was such an important thing for me and why I felt like I needed to share what I was seeing and thinking and feeling as I was moving into these new roles in my career. There's this concept, and there's a couple of articles that I can share with you in the audience about this idea, this concept of the frozen middle, which is when you are a leader and you're thinking about your locus of control, you may not be able to make decisions or have the final say. And you may still be figuring out where your influence is with your senior leadership teams. But you're also balancing that against what your direct team needs, the support they need, the kind of work that they're doing, how to help shape that, and how to make it move in a place where it further and further aligns with people's individual goals just as much as it aligns with the business goals. And so oftentimes, I don't know about you, but I felt like I've had hands tied behind my back on certain things just because of the reality of where we sit. And it takes a little bit more time to communicate about that. And I learned that this aspect of middle management and the roles that I'm in have been referred to as that frozen middle. You can't necessarily make any decisions or solve any problems directly, but you're kind of you're a holding space for all of that information. And that can also lead to disengagement and burnout. So, where the frozen middle has started to thaw for me is realistically looking at locus and scope of control. What do I have control over? What do I not have control over? That's okay. Let me set down what I don't have control over at the moment. And let me focus on what I can do. And oftentimes, I'm finding that that opens doors to the things that I thought I wasn't able to influence, that I set to the side here. Um, this concept of, you know, being frozen in the sense that you aren't able to act, taking that and just marinating with it a little bit helps thaw that ice. And then if you bring in all the things we've talked about previously of making sure your research is up to the best standards of practice, making sure you're inspiring your team, understanding the feasibility of the business, and really making it a healthy, fun team culture, then you'll be able to move those mountains. It just takes a little bit of time.
That is so great. I have seen people get very frustrated in that space. So thinking about you as you were kind of learning and growing through that, did you have any coping mechanisms that you use to like let's just get through this, right? We're gonna figure it out, but how do we get through this? You have any coping mechanisms you can share?
Absolutely. I would say that coming from clinical psych, I'm bringing a lot of those adaptive coping mechanisms, mindfulness, making sure that when we're activated in a moment to take that time to take a breath and process it. Um, but I also think it's a little bit of delusion on my part in a sense of if someone tells me no, I'm like, it's a no right now, but it's not a no forever. And so I think having and building that patience has been a real exercise that has been beneficial in so many different areas of life, not just work.
So we talk a lot about work, but I'm also, as much as I can, trying to drill into everyone, right? You have to be more than just the work. So, do you have hobbies? Do you have things that you like to do outside of work?
Yeah, I do. And I have been mindful of doing more of that because as we talked about with identity, I used to identify myself as I'm a researcher, and I still do that. But really, what that means is I'm curious. So my hobbies right now, a lot of writing. I've been doing a lot of just like fiction writing for myself. There have been a lot of stories that I have been wanting to tell that I set aside while I was in grad school, and they just kind of sat and marinated. Things about what it's like to be a woman in industry and relationships. And so I write in my spare time. I also have really gotten into gaming. I know one of your earlier podcasts also talked about video games and how ubiquitous that is for folks. And for folks like me who are new to that, didn't really know how to get into it. I'm really into this game called Team Fight Tactics, and it's kind of an offshoot of League of Legends.
Okay.
And I've been really enjoying that. What's really cool about the way that that game works is it is about a team. You're figuring out different roles on a team and how do you build a team that is the strongest that it can be, and how does that team perform against other teams when you're battling with each other. So it's kind of funny that the things that I find enjoyable about work are just things that I find enjoyable about life. It's who I am. So yeah.
I have the same issue. I do the same thing. Okay, so with the time that we have left, is there anything else that you would want to leave the audience with? Is there anything else you would want them to take away from listening to you today?
Yeah. Well, first I want to say thanks for creating this space for us to have a chat and, reaching out and inspiring me to think a little more about what it is that we do and what I can bring to it and what we, can unlock together. I think what I would reflect is something you said to me when we were getting ready for this, and that is because of our skill set as researchers and because we're curious people, we can get anxious about things that come up, but we have the skill set to know that we're going to be okay. We can think through challenges, we can think through problems, and if we just make sure that we stay really close to one another as human beings and have that patience with each other, stay curious about each other, we find that we are more working together than divided. So I would say everything's going to be okay. Let's just stay curious and open.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I told you I've been looking forward to this conversation. You are amazing. You are a beast in your own right. I want everybody to go follow your pages because I love the Team Tuesdays. I was just like, she's gonna notice that I'm stalking her page, but I was. But thank you so much for joining the show today. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the awesome work you do.
Thank you.